No worries. There he is.
Hey, buddy.
I've got a whole. I'm trying I'm waiting for a brand new computer, Michael. So this one's pretty slow that I'm working on. So it's been having problems with it lately. So I finally got the board to approve, get me getting something a little more oomph behind it.
That's great. What model are you looking at?
Hewlett Packard, but it's see, this is what I've got here working right now. I got a laptop over here. I got a laptop I bought for the Sanctuary, and it's brand new. I spent $1,200 on it, man. It's perfect. It is so fast.
Great.
So, but I've got this one here in my office, and it's slow. It's only running it's only this here's like only a 200 and I think, I can't remember what it was now, 254 or something like that with the RAM or whatever.
Okay.
And it's just slow, man. It's in the iOS is ancient from 2012 or something.
Okay, gotcha.
The one in the Sanctuary, it's just like boom, like fast. It's perfect. I love it. So anyway, I talked him into let me buy another one, and for here because I said I need it in here because it's just so hard. It takes me sometimes about half an hour to get on. It's like just forever. I can't do anything else. If I want to go look at something else while we're talking, maybe look up something so I can. But it's just not.
You can't do that, huh? Just can't handle it. That's funny. Yeah, that is RAM. Then yeah, it just doesn't have enough memory to be able to manage all that at the same time.
Right. Exactly. There we go. Now I got a gallery. Yeah. So how you doing, Michael? How's it going up there? Look, it looks great. I saw some of Kimberly's pictures.
Yeah.
She put the one in there, the trailer, and that's here. No longer in the trailer anymore.
Yeah, that was a pretty big milestone for us. We unpacked everything, had the moving van here on Saturday, got all that out. Actually, it only took a small amount of hours to be able to get it done. And then that was the night before was the last night that we'd stayed in the trailer. So we're actually in a home. That's the first time in 6 months for me.
Oh my goodness. Wow. So did you come down and get it or somebody brought it up or?
So my dad has owned a trucking business in the past. And so he's got a friend that brought the trailer to us.
Oh, good.
Yep.
Oh, that's good, man. That's good. And then how's the business going? You got it up and running yet? Or?
Yeah, it's going really well. I mean, of course, it takes a lot of time and there's a steep learning curve still with just,
yeah.
I mean, all the things that we could state in church world, just there's similar things. You've got team dynamics and we just hired 2 new people. So we've been doing loads of interviews and
right.
So, yeah, now we technically have a team of 9 paid employees, not counting the 4 of us that live there on property as well that are family.
Oh my goodness, Michael, you're a corporation now, man.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. Are you an LLC and so like that and everything? And oh man, okay. Yeah.
Yep.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yep.
Good. Well, pray for you, buddy. I hope it goes well for you. I really do.
Thanks. Yeah, it has been going really well. The business has been really profitable already. Of course, expenditures are high right now just on the front side, but yeah, it's doing really well. I think everything that I would have hoped for in terms of just the turnkey components of it have been really, really strong. So that's been good.
I found that, Michael, when I was at the bakery when I first started. It was the startup is so that's the one that sort of sets you back on your heels a little bit. So wow, it's a little more expensive, but then you got to give it time. You have to give it time. You got to be prepared for that. So
yeah. Yeah, we were wondering if we wouldn't, I mean, not that we're not profiting right now, we technically are, but we know that we're making massive amounts of investments. And so we thought that we would really, potentially be strong in 6 to even 12 months because it is turnkey. The business has been established. It's not a true startup in that we're the startup component too. But I think we're going to be more there like at the 3-month time frame.
Oh, that's pretty good. That's okay. That's all right. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, good.
Hey guys, welcome. Good to see you all.
Yeah.
Great to have you, Brandon, my faithful friend who is on every call with me. I appreciate that so much. Got Jordan there. My other
Just a heads up, I'm not going to be here next week.
Oh, look at that.
There you go. There you go.
Out the
I'm going to be in Honduras.
Okay, well, hey, some leisure trip that you're taking to Honduras to lay on the beach there. I get it. No,
Yeah.
that's going to be such a good time. You're going to love it.
Yes. Michael, you went down there, didn't you, one time?
Yeah, many times. Actually, I've been 4 different times. Loved. Are you guys staying at Pastor Freddie's house, Brandon?
For part of the trip, yes. We will be staying with Pastor Freddie. We'll mainly be staying on the campground for Heart to Honduras because this is what they're calling a vision trip. And what they're doing is because of the lockdown and everything, they've been reassessing, just like all of our churches have been reassessing, what does ministry look like now?
Yeah.
And, we haven't really had much communication whatsoever for 3 years.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, the moment I came here, that was when our last team just got back from a trip.
Yeah.
And we still have a C train full of fire equipment ready to go. And it's like, so we're going to be also coordinating how it is we can get that to the people there in the community.
Nice.
But we're going to be staying at the camp. There's going to be a lot of conferences. We're going to go around to all the churches that are part of Heart to Honduras and just see what God's been doing. And I'm actually really kind of excited with their new approach to the mission. They're still going to be partnering churches with churches. That's still a big component of it. But instead of churches coming and doing all this work, the emphasis is going to be how can we work on helping like La Concepcion be a pillar in its community to do community development and building and being more of a partner in that way. And so I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. I know George is looking forward to coming as well. It's going to be a great trip.
It's going to be awesome. That's good.
It's my first time out of the country since I had brain cancer.
Oh, wow.
And
that's going to be amazing.
And it's going to be good because it's not a work trip. Because I don't think I still, with my health, couldn't do a work trip. But I could do this. I could send meetings.
And it's an important one, too. Well, Jordan, I know you and your wife are there. Good to have you, Jordan and Cheryl. And then I see Ron's screen, but we got no Ron and no Dana. I know that oftentimes we've got Ron on the screen, but we get to hear Dana's commentary on the side. So maybe they're both taking position on the backside of the computer. Nope, there he is. The man, the myth, the legend right there. All right, guys. Hey, let's just do 1 or 2 celebrations. Somebody give us something that you're celebrating from the last week or 2, please.
Our women's conference is happening today on Friday and Saturday, and it's been just amazing to see how God's developed and formed this. I gotta give some credit to my wife because she's really just been able to take hold of something that she was passionate about and do something. And we already had ladies wanting to gather and be together, and had some really great women's events just the past couple of months. And so I'm excited to see how this is a catalyst for further growth.
Oh, that's awesome. And you guys are streaming the IF gathering there inside of the sanctuary. Well done. That's really cool. How about one more celebration, please?
I just do a real quick one. It's not really a celebration, but it sort of fits into what Lloyd asked us to do last week. Actually, because we're a smaller group in a fairly large building. So I said that, guys, Lloyd said something about how we can change the space, and we did that. We actually did that. We got people, we still didn't meet in the same building, but I actually got them to move out of their pews, Michael, move up front. Let's gather together to make it a little more, so we can, have a conversation with each other instead of having and they were fine with it. The kids loved it. We just moved them all up front. We just gathered together in the first three pews. 3 pews, and it was perfect. It was absolutely.
Wow.
I said,
Yeah,
and
so
what
just moving people forward made the nice difference. Still had the same pews. You didn't take pews out or anything.
No, and Michael, the whole idea, like when Lloyd was mentioning it last week, it actually made a big difference. And the people talking to me on
Might be on
Tuesday night,
mute.
how much a difference it
It might
made
be
just
on
to
mute.
gather together and pray together, and
Yeah.
it just made such a difference.
That's awesome. Good stuff. All right. Well done teeing us up there. Lloyd, we will hand it over to you for the next leg of the conversation on decentralized church.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Just a couple things as I get started here. I apologize. I'm feeling a little out of sorts. Just as when I came onto Zoom here, I spilt my glass of water, and I have water all over my desk. So I've been trying to tidy it up a little bit here. So I apologize if I seem like if I see some water spouting out somewhere, I'll be wiping it up. The other thing is, I apologize, my video quality is not going to be as good today with moving. I been taking down curtains and stuff, and so this light behind me, I should have left that one on, but I'm noticing that backlight is creating problems, and so I'm going to come maybe looking a little darker than normal, so I apologize for that. But anyways, if we can get past all those things, it is good to be together. My wife is coming to visit me today, which I mean, that sounds really, I don't know if that sounds bad, but anyways, it'll be good to see her. She is coming up because this weekend until Tuesday is going to be intense packing. So we are working really hard. I mean, even though I've been doing a lot, we've had some done previously. This is the weekend where we're really going to put a lot of stuff together in preparation for our move. And I have just a little less than 3 weeks, and I will be in Fresno. So looking forward to all of that. Anyways, good, we can be together. I want to jump right into where we're going today. Good to have you all on, and I trust that, again, I know there's people that are watching after the fact or catching, hopefully you've been catching up with. If you haven't been watching, go back and see the archive of some of the things we've discussed, because some of this will make more sense if you do that. I am going to well, actually, before I share my screen, let's just talk a little bit if it just on the assignment that I gave you last week. And it sounds like, Malcolm, you've already given us a report. And the assignment was, what is one strategic space change you can make in your congregation? So what is it that you could do? One small thing, it doesn't have to be big, but is there something you could do that could make a difference in how you utilize spaces in your congregation? So let's just talk about that. Malcolm, did you want to have anything more to say about that?
Yeah, Lord, just quickly, that it just made so much sense to me, seeing that we are such a small group gathering. I said, the gaps in between people, it didn't make any sense to me. So I sort of explained to them what we were talking about last Friday, and maybe let's give it a try and see what you guys think about it. And then we talk about it on Tuesday evening when we have our fellowship night on Zoom. And so we did that. We took, we actually ended up with a few more people than I was expecting. We had a little bit over 30 people for us. That's Lauren. So, and I said, yeah. So they showed, but I said, even though it's 30, we got, we can fit 200 in the building. So I said, come on, let's all move up front. Let's not be your regular Church of God and everybody sit in the back 2 pews. Let's move up front and let's gather together. And I said, I mentioned your thing about the ropes, Lloyd. I said, what I'll do is I'll just rope off all the first 10 pews or the last 10 pews. You can only sit in the front 2. And then I said, but they all came up front. The kids we put right up in the very front, and we just and it made such a difference, Lloyd. And then people on Tuesday night let me know that they loved it. And I think here's the question I have: why did it have to take? It's almost like why you have to prod people even to do that. It's why does that even have to be something that? Why wouldn't they just want to sit together in the first place? Especially when we talk about being a church family so much. yet we don't want to sit together. Or maybe we're more like families than we really, maybe we're more like an actual family at Thanksgiving time or whatever than we want to admit. So it just made, they loved it, especially when it came time for needs and prayer requests and concerns and just sharing with what everybody's going through. It really made a difference. There's a closer connection, and we talked about the whole idea of anointing and just praying and laying our hands on each other and praying for each other. It made a real difference than being on a different parts in a building where it just seemed empty sometimes. And this just felt better. It just felt more connected.
Yeah.
Oh, good to hear. Good to hear. Hey, let me just give a little bit of feedback to you on that. And you asked the why question, and why questions are always dangerous to try to answer. So I'm not going to pretend I have the answer, but let me suggest a couple things that I have observed over the years. I'm not sure if this applies to where you're at right now, but I think part of the reason people gravitate toward the back or spread themselves out is that people, it just tells me, and without trying to do a lot of psychological analysis here on people, I know, every situation is different, but it says to me that people are experiencing some level of discomfort, whatever it is. I mean, there's something about the surroundings that, or it may not even be the actual physical surroundings. It could be the people that are there. It could be a lot of different factors, but there's something there that's keeping them from, if they're functioning as a close family, they're all going to want to be together, but there's something happening there. Now, who knows? I mean, it might not even, it could have nothing to do with what the church itself is doing. It could be what's going on in their own personal space and their own personal lives, but it's always worth observing and trying to figure it out. I think it's too easy to criticize people. I've probably been guilty in the past of what's wrong with these, whatever, we can call them whatever we want. These unspiritual people that don't want to sit up the front. They should be at the front row, totally engaged. Yeah, that's. I think we need to try to get into their minds and their hearts and try to figure out what's really going on, and then of course make adjustments to help that. But I think, and I would think just part of it is you have a large building, a small group of people. Something isn't right. They may not even be able to know, they may not even be able to identify what that is, but it doesn't feel, there's something that is incongruous, that it just doesn't fit. You're in a public space building doing a social space or at a social space size. And so all of this coming together just is colliding and not making sense. So I think that's why it's important to clarify these things. I think if we can put people in the right spaces at the right times, I think they're going to, and do the right things in those spaces that are appropriate for those spaces. I think it's going to bring out of people the best. That's been my observation. So keep playing with that. Good. Brandon, were you going to say something?
All right, my wife just said something to me. No, we haven't been removing chairs slowly.
Okay.
Those 2 rows just disappeared. I don't know what happened to them.
Okay.
But no, I was going to say, I think comfort has a lot to do with it. People are comfortable being able to sit in the back. That doesn't require them to be interactive. It doesn't require them to be participative in things. But when you bring them forward, they can realize the blessing of being in community, not just being a part of it, but actually being in it with one another. And I know, just in terms of our discussion from last week and those 3 to 4 inch moves, Lloyd, something you mentioned, it was amazing. I just saw it happen by itself, just naturally in our church. Was we're doing this mission with a group called City Serve. And what City Serve is they provide just all these sorts of just household goods and things like that, even appliances, to local churches to just go out into their community and give it away and connect with their neighbors and, share the hope of Jesus. And we've been able to be blessed to be part of that here in Exeter and doing that right in our immediate neighborhood. And after our last outreach, the immediate question was, what's the next step? Where do we go from here? Well, last summer we had summer barbecues, and we did these family barbecues, and we would rotate it at different people's houses. And something, especially even like with the underground video, that's just uncomfortable for someone who's never been a part of the church, doesn't really know very many people in the church, to even say, yeah, I'm going to go to this person's home, because that's a very intimate thing. Even though it's going to be a social space with lots of people, it's still intimate, being that it's someone else's home that I don't know. And the team for City Serve decided they're going to do a barbecue, but they're going to do a neighborhood barbecue in the parking lot. And we're going to use this next City Serve missional outreach to get out information about this neighborhood barbecue that we're doing in our community. And it's going to be, yes, it's going to be on the church property, but we're going to be doing it outside in a more safer space for people. And we're hoping to see some good, positive things from that. But the one thing that really hit me was, here's a missional community we have in our church. It is a small group missional community that's very passionate about this ministry. And now they're doing the barbecues. They're coordinating, and they're already working together well. And the last time we planned one of these, it took a group of us, like an hour to kind of figure out, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? We met for 10 minutes. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. And everybody just seemed to be on the same page. And once again, utilizing groups that already exist to move forward different projects that the church is working on. And that was a beautiful thing to witness.
Well, good. Anybody else? Otherwise, we'll move on. If anybody else has any reflections? You gonna say something, Jordan?
No, sorry.
Okay, no problem. No problem. Okay. Well, why don't we dig in? I've got some new content for you this morning here. So let me get this up and running. And share my screen. Okay, there we go. Should be in business here now. Okay, so today what we're going to do, this will be the last session. We're going to talk about spaces, but we're going to do something totally different with it. We're going to try to bring some of this together. Next time we'll delve into something completely different, but I wanted to bring you this material today because I think at first it might come across a little abstract, but the implications of this are really profound and really significant if you want to at all consider decentralization within your church. So what we're going to talk about today is the flow of decentralization. And really what I want to help you do is understand the movement between spaces, because we can talk about these spaces, but how do we use them strategically within the church, and how do we help people move between some of the different spaces? And for the most part, I'm going to ignore intimate space. Not that we should ignore it, but intimate space is a special category all to itself that requires different treatment. But this is something that I have thought a lot about, this whole thing of the flow of decentralization, the movement, et cetera. And I hope you find this to be helpful. We're gonna delve into some things here that might stretch your thinking a little bit, but bear with me. So I'm going to start that by talking about direction and boundaries. So this is just some background terminology. I mentioned this briefly when I was in Madeira in February, because I remember a couple of people asking me more about it later. There's actually a book written by a professor at Fresno Pacific. I've never met the man, Mark Baker. And he has written a new book that just came out like within the last few months, published by InterVarsity, on this particular topic, on what we're going to talk about is centered sets and bounded sets. And so if you're at all interested in the topic, this particular aspect of the topic, the terminology part of it here, take a look at his book. I've ordered the book. I haven't read it yet. like a lot of books. I have a lot of books I haven't read, but I'm hoping that within a few weeks, my reading schedule is going to ramp up significantly. But let's talk about direction and boundaries. And to do that, we're going to start by defining a few things. So first of all, let's talk about what we call centered sets. A centered set is a group of people who you can define by looking at the direction that they are moving in. So in other words, what are they centered on? And obviously for us within the church, we believe that we should be centered on Christ. Christ is where we're moving toward. He's our life. He's our, if you want to get into biblical theological language, or telos, the goal, our ultimate purpose, however you want to define that. And so centered set is basically saying that a group that is centered on something, that is moving in a direction of something, you call that a centered set. It's not so concerned with, are they there yet? See, we always want to talk about, are you there yet? It's like the kids in the car. Are we there yet? No, we're not there yet, but we're moving in the right direction. We're a centered set. We're heading in that direction. And I'll talk about this a little bit more. This has tremendous implications for ministry, tremendous. But let's just, for definition purposes, a centered set means you're moving in the right direction, or in a direction. Then there are bounded sets, and a bounded set, this is where you have boundaries, and this is where you have a clear delineation as to who's in and who's not. And for us within the church, we would say that these are the committed Christ followers and leaders. And especially when you put those together, you can't have leaders who are not committed Christ followers, even though in the church we try that many times and it fails miserably. But certainly within the church, I think we would say that, at minimum, that the bounded sets are people who really do follow Christ and are, and that's clear. There's a clear boundary toward that. Now, what's interesting is that within the church, there are we can look at both of these as existing. So the bounded set certainly are those that are the committed core. And within every congregation, there is your committed core. Those people that you say, they've accepted Christ, they follow Christ, they're passionate about Christ, we can identify them without doubt that they are in. And they hopefully, if your leaders are part of that group. If you have leaders that are not part of the bounded set, then again, I would urge you to do some reflection as to why that is. But within centered set, the centered set is much bigger and broader. You have people in your church who are not necessarily in that committed core, but they attend. They would, if you ask them, they would say, "Yeah, I'm Christian. or some of them may not even be Christian, but they're there out of curiosity. They're moving toward Christ, and it could be at various stages. And I'll give you a diagram in a minute that helps define that. But both of these exist. It's the tension between these two that often is difficult, and sometimes within the church we have trouble making the distinction. And a lot of it comes down to this order issue. In the past, in the church, we've been kind of big on you believe and then you belong. I think more and more we're beginning to see that just start belonging. And as you hang out with us, you're going to begin to believe. Now, for some people, that's intuitive, makes perfect sense. For other people, that's really disturbing, because there are some who want to create the church itself should be a bounded set. That if you're part of this church, you're either in or you're out. There's no dilly-dallying around the edges. There's no, you can attend, but we don't really consider you important until you've made that decision to follow Christ. I think increasingly, though, we're beginning to see that there are people in so many different places on the spiritual journey that we're just glad that they're there. And as long as we see them moving in their direction, I think we're happy with that. I'm always at the place of, I don't care if they're even far away from Christ, But as long as they're moving toward Christ, and you can see that there's interest, there's progression, there's growth, whatever, however you want to define it, I'm good with that. I mean, I want them to move closer to Christ, and I'm going to do everything I can to help that. But the centered set is much bigger, and sometimes we just got to let people belong, and then as they belong, hang out with us, to begin to believe. Okay, so just as far as definitions, is that clear? Does anyone need any clarification on that? I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. Like I say, if you want to get more information on this, read this book by Mark Baker. But any questions on these particular definitions? Okay, if not, I'm going to make one general comment on this, and that is that a healthy church will recognize the spiritual trajectory of individuals in centered sets and find ways to move them toward bounded sets. So I think a healthy church means that we're recognizing that there are people who are part of this larger centered set group, and we all are, even those in the bounded set are part of the centered set. But we recognize that, and we want to move people to greater commitment so that we can put them in these bounded sets. And it's really all about discipleship. This is why we need to have really robust discipleship vehicles within our church to help people make that transition. So how does this fit into decentralization and all that? Well, let me show you something that has been really, really helpful for me. When I was doing my research a number of years ago, I was reading a lot of original material on the missional movement and some of the early writers, and probably one of the most influential books and writers that really started the whole missional movement was a guy by the name of Daryl Guter. And in his book called Missional Church, where actually this whole idea of missional, I think, really took off, was as a result of some of his work. He, as part of a larger discussion, had this funnel, and I've adapted it. I just reread it. I went back to the book just this week just to refresh myself on it again, just to see what he actually, remind myself what he wrote and kind of look at it in terms of my own progression and thinking, and recognize that this was so early on in the process. He was even a little confused in his own terminology and inconsistent in how he utilized this. But the concepts here and some of the way he depicted it have been really helpful for me. And so I've adapted this. So what you're going to see, I put his name there because I didn't come up with this in its original form, but I've adapted it, kind of building on what we've learned over the years that could really be helpful. So there's this funnel, and what the funnel is showing, excuse me, it's a sideways funnel. Losing my voice here. Hang on, let me drink. Sorry about that. In this funnel, it's on its side, and it's trying to demonstrate that the goal is to move people toward Christ. Okay, I think all of us on the call would go, yeah, we buy that. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so that's I think that's pretty obvious. So here's what we end up doing in the church. In the church, we have within that funnel this group of people that we'll call a congregation. Part of the problem is within the church is we're confused at times as to, is this a centered set or is this a bounded set? And typically within congregational life, it has been centered on, well, I shouldn't use the word centered because I'm conflicting terms here, but in our congregational life, we've been focused on public space, the worship service, Sunday morning experience, et cetera, et cetera. And that's been, for the most part, within the North American culture, that is how we have conducted church. It's been this congregation is this whole group of people who are at various stages in their spiritual growth, but it's typically public space, and there's confusion sometimes as to whether it's a centered set or a bounded set. Now, as we've lived in that congregational life, what ends up happening is that we recognize that there are a lot of people that, especially again, that committed core, need extra attention. And so we came up with, and this is where the small group movement emerged back in the post-World War II era, that we recognize, hey, we got to do more than just Sunday morning. There's got to be more than just being in a large group and worshiping and listening to a sermon. We have to get people engaged with each other. That's where growth is going to happen. And so we created small groups. And so and of course, the committed core is right at the tip of the spear. They're the ones that are, hopefully closest to Christ. And that is a bounded set. The small groups become these bounded set discipleship groups, or however you want to define them. They're in personal space, focus on discipleship, and they kind of lead and model the way of Christ to the congregation. But we still have within the church this larger group of people who are centered. They're still centered on Christ, but they're further away from Christ, but they're at least moving in the right direction. And you'll notice on the diagram, I've deliberately, you notice the boundaries on those blobs there on this red bounded set discipleship group at the tip. They got a thick wall around it saying that, hey, this is a clearly defined group. Whereas the center set congregation, you notice the line is perforated, and it's not all together, meaning that there might be it's a little more fuzzy as to who's in, who's out, where the boundaries are. Okay, so this is typically how we have run our churches in North America within the last 70 years. We went from the large congregation size public space groups, right? And we recognized we needed more, so we created small groups, and those tend to be bounded set groups within our churches. Okay, is everybody clear on that? I just want to make sure if you have any questions, this is time to speak up, because I'm going to add more onto this to confuse you. Okay, so let's go on to my next diagram. Actually, before I do, let me just back up here. So here's one of the problems with this. And one of the problems with this, and having worked with churches of various sizes and shapes, also having worked with small groups a lot over my ministry, and I've talked about this a little bit in the past, it is really hard to get people to go and to recruit people into small groups. And we tend to do it in a programmatic fashion. We recruit, we advertise, we come up with interesting topics, we innovate, try to do things to say, oh, we want you in a small group, we want you in a small group. And it's really hard. Part of it is because you're making a big leap from this public space setting where everyone is safe, nobody's really has to know anyone else. You can show up on Sunday morning, you don't have to bare your soul or anything. We want to stuff them into these small groups where they have to suddenly become much more transparent, and we've raised the bar significantly, the challenge bar on their spiritual development. And so it's really, really hard. How do we move people from the centered set congregation into the bounded set discipleship groups? That doesn't happen. It does happen, but it doesn't happen. We don't have an easy way to do that. And I think we get frustrated. And one of the reasons I think we have trouble making disciples within our churches is because we don't have a good pathway to help people get there. We just assume if they'll join the program, they'll be disciples. But we have to recognize if we want to help them move on that spiritual journey, we've got to provide a step in there to help them do that. So this is where the next diagram comes into place. And this is where I think the social space missional communities can make a real big difference. These are groups that, they're committed to God's mission, and there's a whole thing on that, and we've talked a little bit about that, and I'll probably come back to that in a future session, talk more about what does a missional community look like. But the key for our discussion today is that this this mid-size social space, missional community, micro church, however you want to define it, group becomes a bridge that helps people who are, they're centered, they're moving toward Christ. We want to get them into the bounded set. We want to get them into this committed core, much more intense discipleship vehicle. How do we do that? But I think the first thing is we get them, we recognize our spaces, we put them into social spaces first, which then makes it much easier for them to move into personal spaces. In other words, it's hard to get people to move from public space into personal space. It's much easier to move people from public space to social space to personal space. If you make that transition, it becomes it's more comfortable, it's safer, and you're going to let people open up. Because if you remember in social space, so in that mid-sized group, people are interacting with each other, but it's still, there's still a level of comfort because they don't have to bare their souls, but yet they know everybody by name, and there's some, intermingling and so forth, but they don't have to, again, bare their souls that much. So by providing a bridge, we have a much better opportunity to move people toward higher levels of discipleship. So let me stop there. Any questions on this? Again, these are diagrams. I know some of this stuff might seem really abstract to you, but we're going to try to talk this through and help you process this as far as how this could affect your church ministry. Any questions on this diagram? Okay, good. So let me make a comment here. So centered set spaces require a strong discipleship culture, building and led by a bounded set nucleus. So let's just take a look at that diagram again here. Here's one of the keys. And so this is where it start getting practical now, okay? And I'm going to start with a negative. I'm going to give you a negative imperative here, and then try to help you understand what you need to do. Don't go out and start saying, oh, good, well, we need to start creating social spaces. So we're going to create missional communities. We're going to create micro churches, again, however you want to define them. And we are going to Lloyd told us we need to go do social spaces. We're going to start doing social spaces. So here's what I'm going to tell you. Don't do it unless that social space is itself grounded with a committed core, the bounded set of disciples who are leading it and who are guiding it and who are therefore the ones that are modeling what a Jesus-shaped life looks like. See, I think where we make mistakes because we think programmatically within the church. And so if I'm even going to contradict maybe some things that you might have thought I was saying in the past, which I really wasn't saying, but you might have assumed I was saying, is just start going in the church, start programming all this stuff. So make sure you have public space, social space, personal space, just create different programs and run people through them. Well, sociologically, you can do that, but spiritually, it doesn't work, because what happens is if you just put people in social groups, social size groups that don't have a strong nucleus of committed Jesus followers and leaders, the group's going to very, very quickly lose its purpose, get off track, and become inert. And this is where I have seen a lot of failure with attempts to incorporate social spaces or incorporate missional communities and stuff is that they don't have at the core of the missional community a group of people that are just red hot on discipleship, because that core within the missional community is going to be the group that's going to ultimately drive that social space. So we have to have, in fact, I should have done this. I should have added a slide. Maybe if I ever do this again, I'll make sure I have a slide in here. The slide that I would probably put in here would be to grab a picture off the internet of a cell, a living cell from an organism, whether an animal or a plant. And if you did high school biology, you know how it looks. You know, there's a cell where bodies are made of trillions of cells, and there's the cell, and what's at the center of the cell is the nucleus. The nucleus is where the DNA resides. The nucleus is where various key components to the health of the cell exist. Without the nucleus of the cell dies. And in the same way, both I think for the life of your church and for the life of any social space groups that you might have, you've got to have that nucleus. And so if you're thinking decentralization, and if you're not focused on discipleship, you're going to miss something really, really big, because you're going to create a structure, but it's going to be a structure that's going to lack the spiritual intensity that it really deserves. Okay, so let's just pause there for a moment. Give me some feedback, questions, comments. In fact, I'll turn the screen off here for a second, or my sharing, and I have a couple other screens I can show you later. But let's just chat about this for a moment. How does this apply to what you're experiencing, or anything like that? Let's talk about that.
One of the things that came up while you mentioned, I just noticed that is that the whole idea of decentralized, but in other words, still you have to, in order for it to grow into the decentralized, you basically have to start though with a centralized set. In other words, you have to have that, and I do agree, you have to have that core of people that are really committed to God's mission, as you said, or else, yeah, I've seen it happen in churches where there isn't any of that commitment to the God's mission, and within a matter of weeks, it just disbands and they just fall apart, and becomes more like a social group when they talk about politics of the day or whatever, and it just goes away, it just evaporates. So I think one of the things is, in order to grow to a decentralized, it's almost like you have to start at a centralized in order to get to the decentralized.
Okay, so let me clarify my intent on this. So thank you for even bringing that up, because I think what you're discussing is going to be really helpful for everyone else here. So let me say it this way. And unfortunately, this is part of the confusion of language here. When I say centered, I'm not talking centralized. So there is a difference. So I don't think you have to be centralized to do this, but you have to be centered. And there is a difference between the two. Unfortunately, they use the same stem of the word, and therefore there is some confusion. So when we talk about centralization, we're talking about a church that has everything, basically structural wise, everything has the same common organizational core and structure. And that's where churches get stuck. By being centralized, they prevent themselves from growing, they prevent themselves from being effective, because you can only manage so much in a centralized organizational format. We're not talking about centralization organizationally, we're talking about centered toward Christ. So the real issue here is if everyone in our church should be centered on Christ, but that there's this group at the tip of the spear that are this bounded set. They're the ones that intensity of being centered on Christ is even greater. So hopefully that helps a little bit, but I apologize, and that's just the use of language here. Unfortunately, they have the same stem, but hopefully that helps a little bit.
It does. Thank you, Lord.
Good. Anybody else, any comments?
Hey, Lloyd, I just want to comment. I have seen this at work and in play in the past, just to almost like an advertisement for what you're talking about. There was a lady in the church that had been there for many years, actually served very faithfully, but tended to just live in isolation, especially once her husband had passed away. He was the outgoing person that kind of probably led their relationship connections. And once he was gone, she served, was there, would have been in that kind of perforated amorphous blob, but didn't have many connections other than just people interacting with her on Sunday, which again is limited. We invited her to come into a home group that we had, and she was the most senior person in the whole group. And she felt really uncomfortable because it was, a lot of other younger people and families. But we just really encouraged her to keep staying, even to just be the grandmother. She didn't need to be different. And what happened over the course of a period of time is that produced so much fruit in her life. One of the key things was just a depth of relationship that she gained from actually becoming part of the bounded set. And it took a long time. There was a little bit of arm wrestling that we had to do nicely with her to be able to get her to stick around, or else she would never have experienced that. But yeah, just that space was a beautiful holding space where, she contributed in so many unique ways and brought so much life to the rest of the group. And then ultimately now truly does have deep relationships because of that. So that's the thing. I love seeing it and going, oh, I know a lot of stories that would fit in that one, but that one stood out all the more.
Yeah, good.
And I guess here's the contradictory, here's the thing on the contrary side. This is why that story is important. She would have stayed at the church, continued to serve faithfully, and never experienced that because the offer had been there. Come to small groups, come to small groups, come to small groups. Right. And she never wanted to because it was too close of a space for her absence of a husband to go. So this bigger group gave her a comfortable space to enter into. And yes, we had to coax her, but she had heard so many of those calls and never responded.
Yeah. That's good. So the lesson in all this is, I think we have to really be intentional about how we help people move between the spaces. So if you want to get people to the place where they are, following Christ at a much higher level, I think that here's again a very practical reason why incorporating a social space could be really helpful in your church as a way to help bridge people toward that. And so it's part of a larger discipleship culture that we're trying to create. But again, at the core, we want to make sure we have this bounded set nucleus. So it goes back to kind of this vision of what a decentralized church could look like, where the focus is on these mid-sized social space groups that within them have small groups, which ultimately are these bounded set discipleship groups that come together in a larger sense as a hub or in worship, where they're linked together, as this larger entity, all of it centered on Christ, all of it moving toward Christ. And but we find that the ideal space to decentralize on is at that social space level at the missional community. So what we're going to talk about next time, next week, we're going to dig into, okay, so what does a missional community really look like? And again, you may have seen and experienced some of it yourself, and I'm going to try to define it. I'm going to try to challenge maybe some views you might have on it, because it's so easy to have, I would say, even unhealthy views of what a missional community could look like. And so I'm going to try to bring some perspective to that and give you some practical stuff to work on in thinking that through. So here's your assignment for next week. And that is, I want you just to think through the whole thing of centered and bounded sets. Where are those within your church? How does your congregation distinguish them? Do you maximize them? Do you have flow? Do you have pathways to help people move from maybe being far away from Christ to being not only closer to Christ, but truly declaring themselves as committed and not only declaring themselves, but living a life where they are engaged with others and held accountable and processing their faith at a very significant level. I think that becomes really important. So the question is to do some real soul searching on that, and say, where does my church fit into all of this? Do we have that defined? And I would say even just defining the centered set and bounded sets. I think there's tension. I've been in a lot of churches where there's tension because there's differing expectations as to who's in and who's out. And at what point are you in? How would you define? So let me give you one practical example. I'm going to throw this one out for you just for right now. And then you can, because I'm off here like in a few minutes. Michael's going to kick us off here. So you guys don't have to, you guys can throw stones at me, and I'm in Washington State right now. So those stones won't hit me at all. But let me give you an example. So in our churches, we do things like we have our business meetings, and we have, of course, in the Church of God, we don't have members. So we have voting members and all this kind of mental gymnastics or verbal gymnastics that we play. But apart from that, here's one of the points. We do things like a lot of our bylaws within the Church of God say things like you have to be worshiping here for 6 months and declare you're a follower of Christ or something like that. We've got some language like that. But what if we were to ramp it up and say, if you want to be both a leader and to have, if you want to be a voting member, have say as to where you're at, that you will be part of at minimum, a missional community, if not a small group, discipleship group, huddle, cluster, whatever it is. What if we were to ramp up our expectations on people and say, put an emphasis on the bounded sets as opposed to just saying anybody can come? Now, you might think that's contradictory to what I was saying earlier about belonging and believing, but where do we make those distinctions? I think we've been guilty, maybe sometimes being way too open of saying, well, you can be really far away from Christ as long as you've been showing up on a Sunday morning, we'll let you vote. And so it creates, you see the tensions that this creates, like just the questions, who's in, who's out. And I think we have to allow people to journey along with us. I don't want to create that boundary too early, but on the other hand, man, we've got to really think that through very carefully. So anyways, for what it's worth, I just think about it in your own context. How does this work? Certainly, if you have any questions, email me. One of the things we will, I won't even get into that today, but yeah, if you have any questions, email me. We can discuss this more next week. But I want you to really kind of dig into this whole bounded set, centered set thing and see what the implications of it might be for you.
So good. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And I think what really is helpful about your last situation that you put us in is it helped me to see like places where I regularly ignore the concepts we're talking about and focus on maybe other particulars. And so, man, yeah, truly brilliant. As you were unpacking, I thought, where's he going to go with this? And then once it struck, I went, oh my goodness, that is truly amazing, because that's an ignored area oftentimes. So great stuff. Hey, Lloyd, let's see, how many more weeks are you wanting to go? And I'm not trying to shorten it, but just to try to get some expectation. And part of it is because next week, my parents are going to be in town and I would like to be away and just have you lead that one from start to finish. So kind of 2 in 1, I wanted to bring you awareness on, but how many more weeks besides that would you like to keep going?
I probably have about probably 3 more.
Okay.
3 more topics to kind of work through.
Great. So let's do this upcoming week plus 2 more, and let's just hold the space for the 4th week just in case, because I get it. We're introducing content. Sometimes we're so discussion and sharing rich that we need to double up. And so everybody else, let's look at from this point forward, 4 more weeks continuing. And then again, Lloyd, if we need to talk a little bit more about this off call, that's just fine. You'll be able to log on. The only downside will be that it won't be recorded. So we can find a workaround on.
Well, can you give me recording permission?
That's a good question.
Because I could record it and then share it back to you or something.
Yeah, that could be perfect. So let me find out about that one and double check to make sure. Yes, Brandon, because you'll be out next week. So, all right, friends. Well, hey, great to be with you as always. Thanks for joining in. Lloyd, brilliant stuff. This has really, really been helpful. How good is the Gooter funnel? That is awesome. It's very Gooter. So, all right, guys, have a great day. Take care.
Okay. See you guys.